I'm Steve Turk, and you're listening to Sweet Success.
You've just checked in to Sweet Success. Join me, Katie Cline, for exclusive conversations with hotel executives, hospitality leaders, and industry innovators. Together, we'll uncover the strategies and techniques these masters of hospitality relentlessly refine. Whether you're already in the industry or just starting out, tune in every week to unlock the secret to your sweet success. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Sweet Success. I'm your host, Katie Cline, and today I am excited to have a fellow member of the Hospitality.fm family here on the show with us, Steve Turk. Steve is a seasoned hospitality entrepreneur and the founder of multiple successful ventures, including Turk Hospitality Ventures, Tangy Management, Biscayne Coffee, and the Hospitality Mentor. With a career spanning decades in the hospitality industry, Steve has worked at every level, from leading teams at luxury hotels to building his own companies. He's the host of the Hospitality Mentor podcast, co-host of Good Morning Hospitality's Hotel Edition, and a sought-after speaker and consultant. When he's not building businesses, Steve loves traveling and spending time with his family in his native Miami, Florida. Steve, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. Very grateful to spend this time with you. And man, that was a great entry. I got to walk around with you all the time.
You make it easy to make you sound good. It's impressive. I'm excited to dive in today.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here, answer anything you need, and hopefully provide some value to you and the listeners.
Wonderful. Well, I know we covered a lot in that introduction, but from your perspective, in your own words, tell us how you got started in hospitality.
I love hospitality. And so I'll start with this. Was I got lucky enough that my father was an attorney for big hotels down here in Miami Beach. And so I was always growing up around them. And one in particular is the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami Beach. And so as a little kid running around that gigantic hotel, it was like a fantasy world. And that's always just kind of stuck with me. I remember very key things because one of his best friends was the hotel manager. And so we get to see behind the scenes as little kids, get to see all the treats, eat anything in the mini bar for free, right? Like all these fun things. And, we were lucky enough to travel as kids to all these cool places and experience great hotels. And didn't think much of it. I wanted to be a lawyer like my dad. Went to go study and become a lawyer, went to Florida State University. And in my junior year, as I was talking to my dad and I'm reading all this stuff, I'm like, I just don't like this. And he's like, look, you got a long life. And so I want you to be happy. Figure out what makes you happy and do it. And I realized I wanted to be in hospitality and made that switch that junior year and ended up going to the Dedman School of Hospitality at Florida State and started working at the Lowe's Miami Beach Hotel. Was my first job while I was working in college.
Wow. It sounds like Dad was the original hospitality mentor. That's for sure.
He gave me some great advice and I got to stick with it.
Yeah. I was going to ask if you were interested in going into law. And it's so funny how our childlike brains work, isn't it? Because you saw what your dad was doing and you thought, that's what I want. But what you probably didn't realize when you were super young was you wanted the hospitality side of it, not necessarily the legal side of it.
Yeah, I thought I was gonna be like Tom Cruise in A Few Good Men, and like that's how it was on TV. And when I started realizing that's a lot of reading, hours of writing, I was like, this is just not what I want to do. Yeah. But I'm married to a great attorney. My brother was an attorney, and my dad's an attorney, so I'm surrounded by them.
You're surrounded.
So I have my legal team if I need, but not for me. I love sticking in the world of hotels. Yeah. And one thing that happened there was the hotel manager, his name is Paul Breslin, became a great general manager, gave me some good advice. When I was starting out, he said, look, stick with the top brands. It's like, if you are in the top brands, you will learn from the best, you will be trained by the best, and you will see things at a much higher level. And then if you want to kind of dabble in some of the other brands as you grow, you could do that, but try to stick at the top. And that's something I did in my career.
It's great advice. And you can see it through your resume, through your LinkedIn. You've worked with really the best of the best. And I imagine that training ground has been so valuable in starting all of the businesses that you have today.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. These hotels train you so well, right? I'm happy to get into that if you want. But But yeah, these hotels, we don't realize when we work in a hotel, we're running multiple things all at once, especially at that executive level. You're doing recruiting. You have to do marketing. You have to do planning on your P&L. You have to be a great like therapist to your team and just listen to them sometimes. You got to learn to be a great coach. You got to learn to be a great mentor and then control all these things in your 24 hours in a day. People in hospitality can really accomplish a lot of things in any industry.
And it's funny too, because what you're saying is something it took until my first job, which was in the fashion industry, to realize. Like, I thought I want to work in fashion. So I thought that meant a very specific thing. And then you realize when you're working for a fashion business, they have a legal team, they have an HR team, they have all of these business functions that exist across, the ether. It's the same in hospitality, just like you touched in. So if you like the hospitality world, there are so many ways that you could really enter it. It's not just necessarily a front desk associate.
No, I can do front desk. Like my way I started when I came back. So I graduated and was going back to the Lowe's My Beach Hotel because I was like a pool attendant there. It was fun. Great summer job. Made a lot of good connections. And when I graduated, I sat down with the front desk, the director of rooms and the director of food and beverage. Right. And they were, let's say recruiting me. I was at a table having breakfast with both of them.
Right.
And the director of rooms, who is a fantastic now president of a big company, said, look, I'm going to train you. You're going to get into sales. You're going to learn the front desk. You're going to learn to do all these things. And I will mentor you myself. And again, I was 22, 23, just coming out of college. And the food and beverage director said, Steve, do you want to get yelled at the front desk all day? Or do you want to run my amazing pool and get to meet all the prettiest girls and celebrities in the world? And I said, that sounds like a lot more fun. And
you're like, really?
I chose. So there's plenty of ways to start, especially when you're coming out of school. There's a good way to do it.
Yeah. And something you touched on there, you yourself started as a pool attendant and look at what you have built. And then talking about this person who is the director of rooms, who's now the president of a big chain. This is what I love about hospitality the most. I don't know if it's the only industry where this is still possible, but you see this a lot. You see people really starting at what people would consider maybe the bottom and then working their way up. So it seems like you have firsthand experience with that.
Yeah, I've seen it. And you're going to see it because you're doing your podcast. That more and more people I talk to, there's people who are dishwashers and room service servers that are now CEOs and leaders of big companies. Yeah. Right. That's how everybody started. I've got to talk to so many. It's just so inspiring.
Right.
And I think that people don't realize that journey. They just see them at that role.
Yes.
And they don't know where they started. So that's why I love, what we're doing and putting those stories out.
Yeah, there's been a lot of press lately around, I believe, the new CEO of Nike and how he has held so many roles within the organization, right? And I think the fact that there's a lot of press around it shows you it's not necessarily the normal story that we see in a lot of those C-suite roles. But I actually think in the hospitality world, that is the normal story.
Yeah, it's got plenty of opportunities in hospitality. That's like the one industry where if people ask me, like, I'm never going to tell someone not to go do their education and get all the degrees that they want.
Yeah.
But you really can start with nothing and work your way to the top.
Yeah. So going back to what you just said, obviously very clear reason why you ended up in food and beverage, but you've held so many roles at so many different places in that world. What have you learned in that space and what kept you there?
Well, food and beverage is addicting. I think just hospitality overall, like you get this rush. And so it started on that pool deck at the Lowe's My Beach Hotel where you're having thousands of people a day come down to have their dream vacation, right? And that's when I started to realize, like, we have this responsibility to all these people spending a lot of money. They may have saved up for years just to come here, and we have to make it awesome for them. And that pool deck was a challenge because we didn't have enough chairs for all the rooms there, and we didn't have enough seats in the restaurants. And that was my little world for a couple of years, was trying to make sure everyone on that pool deck, what could I do to make them happy? And it gave me a ton of reps with all different kind of people from all over the world, and who I needed to be for them in that moment, right? It's kind of like you're yourself, but you're putting on a role. Like, how can I take care of this family that traveled from Germany, and this guy is on business from China, but just needs a little time here and here. And then we got people that are celebrating their wedding or bar mitzvahs and all these big things that are going on in their life. And so it really taught me, is like, really every moment in a hotel, you can make an impact on someone's life and their memories that they're going to have. And so I learned it there. And that's what kind of took me throughout all the different hotels that I worked at, was that I always kind of went into that day, because sometimes they're hard, right? Like you go into the day and it's, man, you're just going to get crushed, especially during the holidays, no matter how much you plan. But that's what I remember was every kind of minute, every interaction, I had a moment to make someone's day.
And I imagine there's a lot of shifting guest expectations, whether it's from property to property or time of year to time of year, or like you said, culturally, right? Someone traveling from China or from Germany or from New York might have different expectations of what good service looks like. So how did you develop that kind of spidey sense of ascertaining that without them telling you so that you could deliver or over deliver on what they wanted?
Yeah, as it came more as I continued to grow. And so like if somebody looks at my resume, they'd be like, wow, you kind of moved to a bunch of different hotels. Well, I didn't want to leave Miami. Like a lot of people leave the city and are very loyal to companies. I knew if I wanted to be loyal to a company, I was going to get moved around the country and I didn't want to leave my hometown. And so I was like, all right, I'm sticking to the advice I got, working with good brands. So I left Lowe's, went to Mandarin Oriental. And that was like my first 5-star, 5-diamond property. And it was a different level of training because it was smaller and you had a lot more focus on the guests there. And so a lot of training there that I hadn't had before. Look, Lowe's very good training. Mandarin took it another level to where I was able to learn what I need to do. How do I anticipate all of these guest needs? How do I set up the restaurants and even rooms and banquet facilities to make sure that, you know, we've set things up without them having to ask for things? That's what I realized like is the true luxury. You know, I was lucky enough to be at the Four Seasons this weekend, and that's what it is. It's everything is there that you didn't even know you needed, right? And when you do need to ask for something, they're happy to get it for you. And that's what I learned at Mandarin was like, all right, if I went into your room, Katie, and saw you had a bunch of fashion magazines, we made that note in your file and had the same magazines there when you arrived next time. Small touch, right? But you're like, wow, like that's big time.
Yeah.
So I just learned that it came with training for sure, because you need that training and just the reps every day of being in front of different people. You would mess up. Like I got yelled at many times, but then you learn, all right, I'm not going to do that this time. Next time I'm going to try this a little differently.
Right.
And that's where it really comes from, is just being in the action.
And something you touched on there is so interesting is about staying in Miami. You know, I think first of all, bravo for you for knowing yourself so well that you wanted to stay there, because you're right. The other positive, but could be a negative of our industry is it opens up the world quite literally in terms of being able to move around. Miami, obviously, you're fortunate to have all the incredible brands, I'd say, in your backyard. So you almost did a tour of the world without ever leaving Miami. What do you think are parts of hospitality that Miami does better than maybe other places in the world? And what are maybe some challenges that are intrinsic to the city or to the way of life of Miamians?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's even by neighborhood, because I've worked in the downtown kind of business area. And I've also worked on South Beach, which is, you know, you come there for different reasons. But what I would say we do well here is that we really embrace, if I say this the right way, the flash, the entertainment, the excitement of travel. And so when you come here, at least for me, I was always looking to create really cool moments in hotels, whether it was activations or concerts or unique drinks that you would never see anywhere else. You know, I would come up with these things that were ultra expensive because I knew it was a good marketing title. Maybe we'd sell 2 or 3, right? But it was the $500 margarita that somebody would buy and take a picture and say they did it, right? Yeah. And so Miami does that very well, is creating that universe and world that exist in this bubble here.
Yeah.
And especially on Miami Beach, we're all trying to compete with each other because we know each other, most of us. And it's like, all right, he did that over there, I'm going to do this here. And we kind of push each other to do bigger and better things.
Yeah.
But what I think people overlook is really the high level of service, especially at some of the 5-star hotels here. Yes, they're pricey to get to, but I was just talking about this with a friend. The price you pay to get in, you get back in service and attention to detail and value, right? It's all the free touches around the hotel. I think that we do that very well because we brought people from so many international cities that they're bringing everything they've learned from Europe, from South America, from Asia, and they come here and we implement those things.
Right.
And so that's why I think these hotels do so well here, as we get to experiment a lot, especially in the luxury level. But yeah, it's not all parties. I think now you're going to see a lot of cool hotels, especially in Coconut Grove and downtown and Brickell area. There's some really great properties for people to visit. And it's not just, hey, I'm going to go get blackout drunk on the pool deck over on South Beach.
Right. And any challenges that, especially for you having built teams,
Yeah.
and led teams, is there things that you're like, why is this hard for us to get right? Or do you feel like that level of hospitality is just innate?
The challenge here is many. One is getting very expensive to live here, and there's not much land to build up anywhere. So all the people that work in the hotels here, this is a real challenge we have to figure out. The housekeepers, the back of house, the front of house that are on the line level. It's really hard to live in this city now, making solid salary, but you got to work multiple jobs if you want to be in this position, which is kind of sad to say. So that's a big challenge to get people there. So we got to figure out housing here in the city. And I know they're working on things to figure that out. They're even companies now have buses to pick up multiple people from further out destinations. So that will continue to be a challenge. Local government has to figure this out. And we've been talking to some people about that.
Yeah.
The other challenge is just cultural, right? You come here, and I say this all the time. I love living in Miami because it's so close to the United States, right? Like we're right there. And so we have so many people from so many different Latin, Caribbean countries that have different pace, right? They're not used to, it's not a fast pace. And so we have to train them. Like, this is why we have to do it at the time we said we're going to do it and how quickly we have to do certain things. And once you have good training, it helps. But there's so many different cultures that also clash with each other because some are loud, some are quiet, some use a certain slang word in one language is different than another in a different language. And so I have a lot of issues in the back of house. So it comes down to really embracing the different cultures because you're hiring from so many different places, especially in South Florida. So it's a unique place. And especially when you come into it, we have people who come from, I worked in Vegas and I worked in New York and I worked in LA, but then they come here, they're like, whoa, this is very different than anything I've ever experienced.
Right. So interesting, especially I know how many New Yorkers not only are moving there, but love to visit. And our pace and our expectations might be different than other parts of the world, right? So it is a challenge for such an international destination because obviously everyone wants to visit gorgeous Miami. And then how do you exceed those guest expectations?
Yeah. And if you don't speak Spanish, very challenging. So si no hablas español aquí en Miami, no puedes hacer mucho. So you have to be able to hopefully speak a second language because most people will come up to you starting that way.
Yeah. Have you always spoke Spanish?
I'm like one of those hybrid mixes here in Miami. So my mom's from Venezuela. My dad born here in the United States, right? From Baltimore, and then moved to Charlotte his whole life. So I have a unique mix. I'm one of those Miami hybrids here. So I speak Spanish and don't look like I do. So that's one of my things, especially in hotels. Now I can tell I wouldn't speak Spanish for like 3 months.
Right.
And I would hear people talk about me in Spanish and I say, I understand everything you're saying.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's a fun party trick right there.
Yeah. But that's probably the challenge now. The staff is hard. It's still very short staffed in a lot of the hotels. And it will continue because it's just a tough place to find places to live. And when you find good talent, they're locked up. Hotels are locking them up now, giving raises and making sure they're in.
Calling all short-term rental hosts and real estate investors. Ready to turn your listing into a money-making machine? Join me at the 3rd annual Level Up Your Listing Summit, happening March 9th through 11th in Phoenix, Arizona. It's the event where female hosts come together to learn, share, and level up their game. Use code SweetSuccess, that's SUITESUCCESS, to get 10% off your ticket at levelupyourlistingsummit.com. Tickets are sure to sell out, so act fast. Hope to see you there. Right. So nowadays for you, when you're visiting a restaurant as a patron, given your background, what do you look for? What are the things you notice? And are there any red flags that tell you a subpar dining experience is about to happen here?
Yeah. Well, here's what I look for. And because this can be done at any place, right? And so I don't want people to say, oh, Steve, you're only going to Michelin star restaurants, which is not true. So I'm going to give an example at a cheesecake factory that I was at 2 weeks ago, right? They followed the Forbes 5-star standards to a T at this cheesecake factory. And so I would say, I'm always looking for, did you greet me in a timely fashion? Did you take our order in a timely fashion? You notice I had kids here. Did you make sure that, you're going to talk to the kids and take their order at first and make sure that you brought in little sippy cups so that it doesn't spill on the table or make suggestions for those kids? right off the bat, I'm in a good mood as a family member and having my family there.
Yeah.
Then asking us questions, what we like, what we don't like, right? Is there anything we can help you on the menu? Here's what I want to order. Great. Upsell a drink. Wonderful. And then check in on us as the food comes out quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is all paced out. And that's what I really look for in a restaurant is, did they care about us? Was the food come out good? Like, it doesn't have to be spectacular. We're talking Cheesecake Factory. It's good.
Right.
Right. Food was good. Everyone's happy. Took care of me. Refilled my drink. Offered a dessert. Gave us a welcome back next time. Hope to see you soon. Hit every step I would look for.
Yeah.
That's what I really like is like, all right, I felt cared for. I didn't feel like it was a terrible experience and you took my money and I didn't get value for it. And now I talk about this on the show with you, right? Of all the places, right? This is what I'm talking about.
Right.
And the reason I do is because you can do this anywhere, right? Whether it's the small mom and pop restaurant in a strip mall or the, 5-star restaurant. That's what I look for. Did you want to take care of me? Did you take a look at the table, assess who you're talking to, and make sure we're having a good time?
Yeah.
That's really the small touch I look for. And when I notice some red flags, if you have a question, you can interrupt me anytime, is the cleanliness of the place, right? And so there's places that are dive bars and there's places that are like that and have that aesthetic, but they're clean. Right? And so menus are a signal to me right away. Bathrooms are a signal right away. And if I see, sometimes you can poke your head in the back of house. If I see that as a disarray, I know it's going to be not a good experience for me, because I do have some places that are great, like local small spots that look a little rough, but they're clean.
Yeah. There's a difference in a place that's dated, but like you said, clean versus just not cared for.
Yeah. Like there's this Thai restaurant. I can't believe I'm blanking out because I want to give them a shout out. And it's on Calle Ocho of all places. So a Thai restaurant in the heart of Little Havana. And it is a hallway with plastic chairs and, plastic tables you would find in someone's backyard. Fan, no AC, but everything is kept up perfectly. Like the tables are clean. The floor is clean. Everything there is pristine. And I enjoy going there. Right. Yeah. And so it can be anywhere, but you just got to make sure it's clean and upkept and you have pride in your place.
I really see also the point that you made about the kids firsthand. I mean, my daughter is 2.5 now. And then when I go someplace that understands, like, let's get her order in and let's get it in quickly and get that out to me. And oh my gosh, if you have paper and crayons, like, you're my hero.
Yeah, but it's a small thing. And so if you just tell the servers that's got to be part of your lineup every day. Yeah. Hey, if we have kids, make sure you're taking care of them first.
Right.
Make sure you bring them something. Make sure you talk to them directly if the parent allows it. Right. And so we always liked doing those things when I was in the restaurant game.
Yeah. I went to a local pizza shop recently. And like you said, it's nothing fancy. And I went intentionally because I know I love their pizza, but I knew I was going with just me and my daughter. And it was the type of place they had a tablecloth on the table, but then they gave you like the paper placemats.
Yep.
And my daughter started like folding hers or whatever she was doing. And the waitress hands a second one, goes, here's another one. I don't want to have to change the tablecloth after you guys are done. I'm like, wow, way to make me feel horrible.
Yeah. And I hope you don't go back there because there's so many other pizza places to go to.
A million pizza places. Yeah. And also you should be changing the tablecloth after everybody. There was 3 people in there. You're not busy. You're fine.
That's why. That's probably why. That's why they're slow. Right. But that's what I'm talking about is that everyone's so busy and so fast paced and they don't really, I see it where sometimes the servers and restaurant staff, bartenders think of the guests as furniture sometimes. Like I noticed, like if you're yelling over people,
oh my God,
and hey, they're talking over you, and sometimes they'll bump into you. And it's like, guys, remember these are actual people here because you
people who are choosing to spend their time and money there, right?
Yeah. So again, small touch. Could have just kept giving you paper, mats that cost less than 10 cents. Instead, she made you feel bad, and you won't go back.
Exactly. And my daughter dropped some pizza on the floor. So she was just like sitting there, like shooting us daggers as if I didn't feel bad enough for going out to eat with my child to begin with. But I shouldn't be made to feel that way. No. So that's why you're going to find those places that are good. Yeah. That will take care of you. Because as soon as they do, I lock in. Like, all right, you cared for me. I want to make sure I keep coming back. Yeah. So changing tact a bit, after many, many years working in the hotel industry, you then started to apply those learnings to the vacation rental industry. So I'm curious what made you enter that space?
Yeah, so I'll reverse back a little bit. So in 2014, I had my first entrepreneurial itch. I was working at the Trump National Doral. So before all the politics, I was working in that hotel, and I was helping transition it from a Marriott to a Trump hotel, which they wanted to get 5-star, 5 diamonds. And part of it was seeing all this staff come through. We were using a staffing company, and it was terrible. I was like, man, these people are just not good, and I could do it better. And I started seeing all these checks that I had to approve to go to the staffing company, and it was hundreds of thousands of dollars. I was like, I could do this better. I know I could do this better. And I don't know why I said that, but I said I could. And so at the time, I went to my general manager, David Fader, who was a great mentor. He passed away, sadly. I said, look, I know we're under renovation. Maybe I can take some time off, and here's what I'm going to try to do. I want to open up a staffing company. He looked at me. He said, I'll give you a month. Okay? In a month, if you didn't do it, come back. But I have a feeling I'm not going to see you again. And I went and I started up the staffing company and grew it to 700 employees. And during that time, we started getting a lot of phone calls from locals asking for housekeepers. And they're like, hey, I have a house. Can you send this housekeeper to clean? I was like, oh, we don't do that. I don't know what is this for? It's like, oh, it's Airbnb. And Airbnb was just starting to come up. But then we got that call like 30 times from different people. I was like, all right, there's something here. Let's explore this team. And we did the first one. And we made very little money for a lot of stress. I was like, that was not worth cleaning someone's house. But if we could control the whole thing, this would be cool. And so we started to pitch these people calling us if we could manage it for them. This was now 2016. And I opened up a brand. My staffing company is called Vita Hospitality, and that was called Vita Stay. So you would stay with us. We would manage the homes. And the first one that accepted our offer was this 12-bedroom villa in a neighborhood called Coconut Grove. And I made the pitch, and he's like, all right, that sounds good. Here's the keys to my house. And I was shocked. I didn't have any knowledge of how to run this. And we figured it out. And when I sold that company, I didn't think I was going to do that anymore. So I sold my company after 4 years. That included the vacation rental, but they really wanted the staffing. And so that was my first dabble with it. Now, cut to a couple of years later, I'm back in the hotels. Someone who worked with me, this gentleman named Victor Feria, had liked that part because he was running it in my company.
Right.
And he said, Steve, I love doing this. Will you help me? And I said, yeah, I'll help you. And that's part of the plan that got me out of the hotels. Wow. And so now we're 50-50 partners in Tangy management. And that was the whole thing. He worked in luxury hotels. I worked in luxury hotels. Everyone we hire has hotel experience. And we apply all those things in the vacation rental world because it is a little bit of the Wild West where people are doing it and thinking that it's just, I'll just put it on Airbnb and I just need a housekeeper. It is not going to be successful. This is a full out hospitality operation if you're doing it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like there's so much to unpack in what you just said. So in 2014, I can completely understand how you would see a white space, right? I'm spending all this money on this staffing company. They're not sending me great people or unreliable or whatever it is, right? But then how do you go from I could do that better to like actually doing it? Like, how did you even know where to begin?
Yeah, so it starts to, whenever I have an idea, it starts to kind of creep in my mind, and I get a lot of them. So it was probably like a lot of you out there listening, like, oh, that's a cool idea for a business. Right. The ones that stick around for like a couple of weeks with me, I was like, all right, I got to explore this a little bit more. And so I had very limited staffing experience when I was just out of college. Right before I went to Lowe's, I was helping a friend in a company that was doing medical staffing, which I did not like. But I remember it was like, all right, here's how you do it. This is how you set it up, right? You just need to roster people and schedule it. So I said, all right, I could do this because my dad's a labor and employment attorney. So I know how to hire people. My wife was an attorney at the time, or is an attorney. And I asked her some questions about like, contracts I need. And what I did was got all that lined up first. All right, I have all these documents I need to actually hire somebody legally. I can background check them and make sure they're good. Then I found it was before kind of WeWork took off. I found an office space that gave me a virtual address on Brickell Avenue. So I felt fancy, right here on Brickell. So I could start to kind of plan out things on my days off and nights. And then when I got the approval from my GM, I went to a friend of mine that was an HR director at the Intercontinental in downtown Miami. And he said, yeah, I need some banquet servers. We were having trouble finding banquet servers. He said, if you can find me 20 to 25 banquet servers for an event in 3 weeks, you got our contract. And so those kind of things all lined up. So when I got that invitation from the HR director, I had no banquet servers at the time, but I said, I've got them for you. And I figured it out, hired them, got that contract. And that's when I resigned from the hotel.
Yeah. And how did you find those first people for that?
I put ads out online. So whether it was like Indeed or Monster.com at the time or whatever it was, and it said, meet me at 777 Brickell Avenue, this floor, and we'll do an interview. And then I started calling all my friends that I knew had been servers before and just said, look, come help, come work. This is what the rate's going to be. I need your assistance to get this in. And I got the people they needed there.
Wow.
But I had to learn very quickly that, I had never been a business owner. And so the hardest part was I was growing quick after that.
Right.
But hotels, as you know, even though they might sign a contract that they're going to pay you in 30 days, don't pay you for 45, 50, 60, even 90 days, some people. And I had to do payroll every 2 weeks. And so I had to figure out how to get thousands of dollars in money. We had a loan that I took out to pay people. And that was just the challenge, is the cash flow, right? Because your product is people. Yeah. And it's not like, all right, I sold this coffee and I'll wait to get paid and then I'll pay it off. No, people need to get paid every 2 weeks.
Yeah. Otherwise, they're not going to do the next job for you.
Yeah. Your money. So I never missed a payroll in 4 years, but that was probably the biggest stressor of chasing money around. Yeah. And because I took that first loan was a mistake I made because I couldn't get financing any other way because that loan I had to pay off before I could get financing anywhere else. Right. But in the end, we were successful. Yeah. We made a lot of money. We grew it to 700 people, but I just hated it every day. So it was the first time I learned, we're like, all right, I built a company. It works. Someone bought it from me, but I just did not enjoy that business at the end going in every day because I was dependent on John showing up for his bartending shift or Sarah showing up for her housekeeping shift. And if they didn't show up, the GMs would start yelling at me or the directors. And so all of a sudden I was like, man, my brand is starting to get, a little tarnished because of things I don't control.
Right. It's really just interesting. A lot of what you're saying, it's almost like you knew you needed the perception, right? That's why the fancy address on Brickell was crucial and a place to actually meet and interview people, of course. And then it was your existing relationships that you had from the industry that became so crucial in actually making it happen. But really the biggest thing was like your ability to just be like, I'm going to figure it out. I don't have the money. I'm going to get a loan. I don't know employment law. I'm going to talk to my dad and to my wife. It's really impressive. And I think a lot of people would see that white space and go, somebody should do that. And you thought, I'm going to do that.
Yeah. I think the biggest key I left out was that it was when Uber was taken off, Airbnb, all these things were taken off at that time. And we're like, all right, we had some help to build a rudimentary app where the hotel could request people and then our team could sign up for it. Right. It was a little bit more manual stuff we would have to do, like send the alerts, but that's how we grew so fast. And so that is what really made us stand out in this market. Right. But it was tough. It was a tough industry. We were competing against companies that had a lot of people who were illegal working, right? And hotels didn't care because the contract they signed said, oh, they're legal. Right. But then they would come to my office where I did background check, drug test, e-verify, do everything the right way. And we could never hire them. Right. And we would lose out sometimes to these companies that would charge less because of these things. Right. So it was just an industry that was a little bit shady in the end. I learned a lot of kind of dark things happening in that industry, and I just didn't want to be in it anymore. Yeah. And the 12-bedroom home that became your first management client, how did you get them to say yes and hand you the keys to a mansion? Well, it's funny. I was always suited up, right? So I was always in a suit when I had the staffing company because I was going in hotels. So I'll never forget going to this house. A gentleman named Bill Merlot. So still someone I talk to every once in a while. Had this big property, beautiful. And I remember rolling up in my suit and he's in the pool having a beer on like a Tuesday afternoon. And he's like, look, I have this place. This realtor's running it. It's not being maintained how I want it. Why should I hire you? And I went into my pitch. I'm a hotel guy. I already have access to 700 staff members. I'm going to put it on Airbnb and talk to people like a hotel would. And he's like, all right, I like that. How much do you charge? I forget what I said. We undercharged by a lot because I didn't really know the competition. There was no competition in this space. So like, we charge 18%. And he's like, okay, send me your agreement. And that was it. I'll never forget. He gave me the keys. I went back to my office, the staffing office, and I was like, guys, it was I call it all hands on deck. I had like 9 managers there. I was like, so we manage a house now. It's going to be on Airbnb, and we're going to figure this out. And just like we did everything else, and it was a big success. So we did well with him, and he referred us, and then another person referred, and I kept getting more and more referrals. Toward the time, it was like 15 or 20 homes that we had that we were managing when I sold it. And so Victor, who loved that part of the industry, was smart enough to, when I sold it, go after a lot of those owners and say, hey, Steve sold the company. I'm going to stay on and make my own. And then he created Tangy.
Right.
And that was it.
Wow. Oh, it was probably at a time when like a management company wasn't even really a thing yet, right?
Yeah, there was no like Airbnb arbitrage model or all these things you see. It was not that. It was just like, I got all these calls. We saw there was a need. Again, I was like, we could do this. We could figure this out. Yeah. And we did.
And even nowadays, I think, so I have 2 properties that I do as short-term rentals. I manage them myself, but only after acquiring the first did I go down the rabbit hole to learn about this whole world. And like you said, there's a lot of podcasts and books and information out there now that was not out there definitively in 2016. But even still, if I talk to just people in my normal life, most of them have never heard of arbitrage and management companies and don't even know it exists. So it must have been something that you were really figuring out on a day-to-day basis. Like you said, that you didn't even have like, oh, here's the competition in the area that we can
there wasn't any. Right. There's a lot of like mom and pops that have been in business for many, many years. Like the vacation rental industry is not something new. It's just the model of putting technology on it and being able to scale it up across multiple areas was new.
And democratizing it, that anyone could get into the space, right? But I think, as you touched on, that's a real issue where you have people who buy a property and put up their iPhone pictures on Airbnb and say, why is this not making money? Oh, it's Airbnb bust, when it's actually, they're not operating it properly. Yeah.
How did you get started with it? I'm interviewing you now. How did you get started?
you couldn't help yourself.
Yeah, I needed to know.
So I had to move back to the States at the end of 2022. Unfortunately, my mom is very sick, so I wanted to be closer to her and to my dad to help out. And we were moving back to the New York City area because my family is in Long Island, and this is where we had lived before, so I'd be close to them while we kind of figured out what was next. Obviously, probably similar to Miami, the New York real estate market is just insane, and not knowing if we wanted to be here long term, it just wasn't something that we wanted to invest in. So we decided we would rent, but we thought, maybe now is the time to purchase a home near Lake George, which is upstate New York, about 3 hours north of the city. We had gone every summer camping, my husband and I. We just loved it up there and always thought, oh, wouldn't it be nice if one day, and coming from a hotel background, I thought maybe we could really differentiate ourselves and stand out in the market, because as you just said, the vacation rentals in that area, it's not new. It's been going on for centuries and centuries. Actually, Lake George, fun fact, is the birthplace of the American vacation, that word, because the wealthy people in New York City used to vacate the city and they would go up to the Adirondacks in the summertime. So it's a very established vacation rental market. But if you looked on Airbnb at the time, and even still right now, you have, poor design, poor marketing, bad photos. So we've been really lucky that it's been a good market for us, because like you said, taking that kind of hotel expertise and saying, well, your number one marketing vehicle is your photos. How would you not invest in professional photos? Is just something that other hosts may or may not think about. I mean, I even saw recently on a host Facebook group, people were saying that they're still not providing shampoo, conditioner, and body wash because surely people will bring their own. And I just thought, I mean, these are just table stakes.
Little things.
Yeah.
Yes, what you need.
And what about for you? Like, what similarities do you see between vacation rentals and hotels, and maybe what differences?
Yeah, so I can say what we do here a little bit different, because we're actually redoing our website right now. We spent a lot of money on that because our brand was not the forefront of this. We realized something early. And so this may not be for everybody, but for us, when I took over that villa, we put our brand on it. And I was like, man, this place is getting trashed. Like, it was like party, like it was not being taken care of. And I was like, let me try something different. Like, if this was a person they were speaking to, they probably wouldn't trash this place. So I asked Bill, like, hey, can I just use your name to put on here? He's like, yeah, that's fine. And so as soon as we started answering as the person, right, and we would say Bill's assistant or forget exactly what we're doing, things changed on a dime. Like, that place was not trashed. It was taken care of. People knew they were staying at Bill's place. And so that became some of our secret sauce. So all of our properties, if you go on Airbnb, you won't see Tangy on Airbnb anywhere. You're going to see Katie, you're going to see Steve, you're going to see Victor as the names of the people that actually own this place. Right. And we answer in parentheses as their assistant while we talk to them. And that has saved us big time. And I also think that's something that I don't know if the others should try, but that's what we do. And it's been helpful. Now, our brand, we're going to grow because if you stay with us and you like it, we're going to make sure that you have the option to book with us one way or another afterwards. Right? Just like a hotel, you use the OTAs to get people in and you try to make them brand evangelists once they stay with you. But that's something that we saw that's very different than a hotel. Like, oh, it's all about branding and all this. Like, we needed to change that at the beginning because you're staying with people and in their homes. That was one thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It was something we did with our property too. I was going to put our logo and our property name, and I thought exactly that. Like, people have a harder time trashing Katie's house than hopefully they do nameless.
Sweet old Katie, right? I'm not going to break all her house rules.
Exactly, right? Exactly. And even like as a guest, what I've seen is when it is a nameless, faceless management company, oftentimes they don't know the property as well. They don't answer as quickly. So it's a perception thing too.
Yeah. So for us, again, I can answer a bunch of questions on this now, but we brought something from hotels that I believed in. I had a scorecard in hotels. So I knew, like, if I was on an island, right, this is something from the entrepreneur operating system called EOS, book traction. But if I'm on an island, I can look at this scorecard and know the health of my company. And so we have that for Tangy, where it involves several things. It's scores that guests leave us. It's how quickly is our team responding in minutes to messages. It's revenue brought in, how many bookings, how many cancellations, our spending outside of our budget for supplies. We have how many visitors on our website versus, and this is week to week. So every week we track these stats. So we know how we're doing and versus the goals we set for ourselves. And that's something that, comes from hotels where it's all about the KPIs that you have in place. Like, what is the guest service score? How is our budget doing? How are the visits on the website? How many direct bookings are we getting? So we track all of those things just like we learned at a hotel, right? Because to me, it's normal. But then I go talk to others like, wow, how do you do this? What is that? We never thought to do that. And so it's interesting to see it's still a big open space in the vacation rental world and short-term rental world.
Yeah. How do you choose which properties you work with for the management company? I assume you're not just taking anyone who applies to work with you.
It's funny. We've actually been unraveling some of the deals that, when you're an entrepreneur, it's my partner, Victor, we're co-founders of this now and 50-50 partners. I was in hotels for the 3 years he was running it.
Right.
One, I had a non-compete, so I couldn't do anything from what I sold. But also I was focused on the hotels. And so you take on properties that you might need at that time to grow. Right. And so now we're shedding some of those properties so we can continue to grow, right? Just like, animals in the wild do, you got to shed to continue to grow. We're shedding some of those properties that got us here. And now our rule of thumb is, we say this to each other all the time, would you want your parents to stay here? And so if we're good with our parents staying here, they become a client. And we've said no to so many now. And so sometimes we kick ourselves because we've said no to some that had potential or, this could have been the right place, but it's on the wrong side of the highway, right? Of all these things, we say no to more than we say yes to. And that has been a key. And more important is the owners that we work with. And so, if you work with a bad owner, they're your partner. And it can be a disaster, literally, where we had an owner was reading, the Airbnb messages and showed up at the house and started screaming at the guests on a normal thing. It was not a big deal. Right. And so we were like, now we control the messaging. They don't have access to see all these kind of things. We give reports on all that, but it's stuff like that where you just have to realize in that game of management, you have two clients. It's the guests and the owners.
Yeah.
And so that's why we're pushing now to control more of our own destiny and start to control the projects that we want to work on and be owners in.
It's so interesting. I saw someone post in a international Airbnb host Facebook group the other day, a screenshot of themselves sending a message to their guest, essentially asking why they have the air conditioning set at a certain temperature when outside it's colder. And I cringed looking at that.
That's how they want it. That's how they want it.
Because they paid. Like this, you didn't do them a favor and allow them to stay in your house for free. Like they paid. And yes, there is a certain level of decorum that you'd hope from guests, whether they're staying at a hotel or a short-term rental, but it's their house for that time.
Yeah. Like I tell you this, listeners out there, if you have your Airbnb, do not lock your ACs.
Oh,
okay.
gosh.
There's so many people that, I can't let it go below 70. Like, well, then we got to work on your AC issue. We got to get that fixed, right? Like you can't control these things for guests like that. There's a lot of little things like that too. I see everywhere that we talk to a lot of these owners. Like no one wants to stay here. Yeah, because you've got terrible reviews.
Right.
How am I going to help you if you don't have anything in your home that's to help guests have a good stay? And so it's a lot of education too. We see.
And speaking of education, in February of 2022, you started The Hospitality Mentor, an immersive media platform that celebrates the world of hospitality with a podcast, a newsletter, a video series, a website, and even a tailored AI assistant.
Yeah.
What made you want to start this in the first place? And what came first, the podcast, the newsletter?
I'll tell you. So it makes me smile of how this has evolved. So I knew from having the staffing company, right? When I was starting it up, everyone said they're going to help me out, right? All my contacts, I'm going to be there. I'm going to help you out. I was so surprised by the amount of people I thought I was going to count on to help me that didn't. And then the ones that actually did surprised me, right? It was amazing to see like people I never thought of who were going to help me actually help me. And the ones I really thought I was going to count on did not, because why? I was a vendor all of a sudden. I was not a hotel. I was not Hotel Steve anymore. I was a vendor. And so I remember that clear. So coming out and starting this, I knew I needed a marketing tool. And so LinkedIn was very big for me. So LinkedIn is how I started consulting, because I was posting on LinkedIn consistently. I made a point of it in 2020. If you go back, someone wants to go back and look at it. I was motivating myself during a tough time, and it was like motivational things. I was like, all right, maybe this will help one person. And that started growing. Then I started giving tips about stuff that I was doing and then sharing more and more as I got comfortable, which led to people asking me for my help. And so I was like, wow, that's pretty powerful. And I wasn't planning on leaving the hotel at that time. And then one guy from Texas in Austin had a little esports restaurant that was struggling. And he had video games that were in sports. That was his thing. I gave him a little game plan to follow because I was in a good mood that day. There was nothing, took me a minute. And he wrote back to me like, man, you just saved my restaurant. How much do I owe you? And I was like, there's nothing. I went home that day. I was like, all right, if I could get like 10 of these guys, that's something that I could actually do very well with. And the hotel life changed for me. And so I said, all right, I'm going to start this. But if I'm going to start it, I gave a 6-month notice to my company. I'm going to build out everything I need to do before I jump. Not like last time where I was figuring it out on the fly. And one of the things I know I needed was a podcast. Because if I was calling on the general manager to talk to Steve about consulting, I'm never getting through to that general manager.
Right.
But if I call that general manager and say, hey, John, I got a podcast called The Hospitality Mentor. I want to talk about your career and inspire all the people like me coming up, which was true. I wanted to do it. Would you do it? And I would say 90% of the time, they say yes. And then I have my 20-second pitch at the end. Hey, here's what I also do if you need anything. And that was my plan. I wasn't going to be anything big. Just podcast, do it, put it out on audio, move along. And that's where it started. But what shocked me was one night I was having a glass of wine. I was like, all right, let me see who I could actually get on this podcast. And I go on LinkedIn and message every major CEO of every hospitality company. Go to sleep, and the next morning, 6 of them answered. I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And that's how it really started taking off. I was like, all right, I could really get these people on here, start using this podcast to make myself an authority, but also educate so many people out there, because I always wondered how people got to that position. And I get to surround myself with the smartest people in the industry. For 1 hour, I get to have a private talk with these people. Like, to me, it blew my mind that I could do that. And then it just started turning in, like, what else could I do? All right, well, I just talked to Raul Leal of SH Resorts and Hotels, who's the CEO. Maybe I can take a couple of quotes and make it into an article, which then turned into a newsletter, which then was like, well, what if I go to that hotel and show it too? So then I started with videos, and it just kind of started layering on top of each other to where I have so much fun doing it. That's what I want to turn into full-time one day, but it'll get there. We're working on it.
Yeah. And that was a lot of the advice that you were so kind to give me when I was starting this podcast, was thinking about more than just the podcast, but all of those offshoots and ways that you reach your listeners and potentially attract new listeners. Like, for example, this AI assistant, is that something new that you've launched?
Yeah. So when I saw, look, I love using AI and ChatGPT. If you're a paid user, you get access to other people's GPTs. And so when this first came out, I was like, all right, this is pretty cool. So I could load in every podcast that I've done and be able to ask it questions.
Wow.
I was like, I'm going to try this. So if you go on my website at thehospitalitymentor.com and say, talk to the GPT, you will be getting advice from over 150 different leaders in hospitality that it's all learned. And it all comes from this platform. And so now that I'm writing a book, I'm taking that. I've already put the first draft into it, actually, so people can maybe get some answers there that are a little bit different. But has all this advice built into it. And so I'm able to put all the stuff I've learned from all these people, have these amazing, conversations. Now anyone can go on there and ask it any type of hospitality question.
And tell us more about the book.
Well, the book, again, came from the offshoot of having these podcasts. I had all these transcripts, and I was like, man, I've interviewed some great people, but when someone listens to a podcast, it's, it kind of tapers off. Like, you still get downloads coming through, but it's not the same as when you first launch it every single week. And I didn't want that knowledge to disappear. And so I was like, all right, I asked the same 2 questions on each podcast was, where did you start? How did you start in hospitality like we did today? And then what advice would you give to your younger self if you were starting today? And so I had all these kind of starting points, advice, and then their titles now, which were big. I said, I'm going to make this book, and the title is still being worked on, but it is the top 75 guests I had that are giving their advice to the younger self. And then I provide the game plan based off of that advice of how you can get there. So you have the advice to the younger self and a full checklist of things you need to do to get there, and then some things to reflect on and answer yourself. So we have a chapter for all these amazing people that will be in the book, and some stories from me, which will be out, if we're on point, at the end of November.
Wow, that's soon. And you've talked about more than 150 leaders you've interviewed. I know you have over 100 episodes of the show. Now, when you're pulling back and putting the book together, is there one interview that really sticks out to you as, something that kind of lives in your head and replays over time?
There's several of them. And I'm going to give one. I'm not sure if I can share his name or not, but it's someone who's now battling cancer and is on their last kind of stages of their battle. And I'm hoping that they can pull through. But I went to go see this person last week, and it was just like, that's not the guy that I know and that I interviewed. And so I went back and listened to the podcast, and it made me smile because it was that person. I could hear their voice again. I could see like their energy, and I could think of those things. And so that was very special to me. I actually started tearing up in my car because I have that now, and his family has that, and he'll be in the book. Right. And so I'm getting a little emotional talking about it. So that's probably my favorite, because I didn't know that would be the case when I recorded it.
You preserved that moment.
Yeah. So I think that's really special. What we do is like, we're preserving all these moments in time that people can come back and look at, which I think is so cool. Like, you have your 2-year-old, I have my kids. I think, 40 years from now, maybe this will exist somewhere online. They can go back and look at these things that we're making.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way, but it's almost like if you look back to, the creation of humans, storytelling has always been how we've communicated, right? And this is just preserving the stories along the way.
Yeah. So, but if I've been looking at it as a whole, what I really enjoy about it every time is like, I get to spend an hour with you, Katie. Like, when else would you do that in the real world? We get to talk about our lives and what's going on and all the fun stuff. I get to do that with so many amazing people each week that I love it. I would just love to continue doing it.
And selfishly, like you said, I get to ask you all these questions that pique my curiosity. And similar to what you said about what you started with LinkedIn, like you were sharing those motivational quotes and images because they were helping you. And you thought maybe this will help somebody else too. So it's hopeful that when someone listens, they think, oh, that's really what I want to know too. And then we get to hear that from you.
Yeah, I love it. I love the whole space that we're in. And look, we get to learn, we get to be smarter and apply it to the jobs that we have now and the businesses we have now.
Yeah. And obviously you have so many amazing business ventures, but the last one that I want to touch on is Biscayne Coffee, something that you started in May of 2022, because clearly you didn't have enough going on with the launch of the Hospitality Mentor ecosystem. It's an eco-friendly coffee brand that donates 10% of all sales to Biscayne Bay Foundation. So tell me about that. Why'd you start it and why that organization specifically?
Well, there's a couple of things that made it happen. First, though, was here in Miami, Biscayne Bay is the major body of water. Everyone goes out and plays on it. And in 2020, when we were locked down, for whatever reason, it got so polluted that all of a sudden there was this big fish kill. Like thousands and thousands of fish were dead. A manatee had died that we saw. And I was with my kids. I'm like, man, what are we doing? And my kids were asking, like, what's happening? Why is everything dying? I was like, well, I guess we're polluting the planet a little bit here. Not a little bit, a lot. And what can I do? What's the little dent that I can make here? And the next morning, as I was sipping my coffee, the idea struck to like, all right, I'm drinking this coffee. They need to do that every day. I know coffee makers. I know I could roast this coffee. I'm going to make Biscayne coffee. And it was in my mind for a little bit. I dabbled here and there, but officially launched it, like you said, in May 2022. The reason that made it take off was we had all the vacation homes and we were buying coffee from Starbucks for all these vacation homes. I said, hold on, we've got these 50 homes. That's enough to get started, right? And I made a deal with my partner. Said, we'll just buy it at cost and we'll promote it to the guests in-house. It's free for them. But if they want to buy it, when they go home, they could also buy it. And so that was really how it took off. So I found the roasters. We made the mix because I was the director of food and beverage. We had to make sure it tastes good. And then made sure that the bag was beautiful. I wanted it to look like a vintage poster from, the national parks, so that if it was on your counter, it wasn't something you wanted to put away in a cabinet. So it actually stood out. And made the deal with the Biscayne Bay Foundation to donate 10% of sales. And then we were off and running. I made the Shopify website myself. My brother took the pictures and we got up and going. Wow. And it's been a really fun business to work on because it's a nice, slow growth. I don't have to stress out about it too much. Guests buy it. I now have a retirement community that buys it just for all their coffee needs and become my biggest client. I have a law firm that buys it all the time. We have all the guests that stay in the house. So I start seeing like the bags going to different parts of the country, which is fun. So that's really how it took off, was seeing I had to do something, whether it was just a little something, but I always love hitting the donate button every quarter.
Yeah.
And it was just another tie-in to what we're doing. So everything ties together.
Yeah.
That's why I want people to know. It's like, it's not 4 different businesses that run in silos. The consulting goes along with hotels and vacation rentals. Tangy Management is evolving into a hospitality solutions company where we do short-term rental, long-term rental, boutique hotel management. And now we have the coffee that goes into all of those places.
Right.
And then the Hospitality Mentor is the megaphone to really share and spread the word about everything we got going on, but also educating people while we're doing that.
What I love about the coffee too is it's this perfect blend, no pun intended, of like environmental responsibility meets local as well, which I think we're starting to see particularly in products, not necessarily like in experiences, but we are seeing that too, that's really where the consumer wants to spend their money, right? Is something that is local and is giving back and, protecting the world that unfortunately we're seeing, like you said, the pollution and the effects of our behavior.
Yeah, just sad. I mean, I'm not a scientist at all, but I see all these things happening, especially with this Hurricane Helene that just came through, and all my friends in North Carolina and Georgia and the west coast of Florida. Like, the selling coffee is a little dent, but everyone made a little dent. It could make a big difference.
Absolutely.
So that's why I'm hoping it inspires somebody a little bit.
And Steve, last question for you before we move into the final 3 questions that we ask everyone. Do you have any predictions for the future of hospitality?
I think that we will become way more efficient with technology, right? And I want to empower people to start using some kind of AI tool to make you more efficient, because all these businesses are short staffed and you got to be able to do many things quicker these days. And so I still talk to a lot of people in the hotel and hospitality industry that have never even tried a ChatGPT or Claude or any of the things that are out there for people to use. Try one of them today.
Yeah.
And pay the $20 a month to get the better version and see what you can create. I would tell people that, but it's going to be about efficiency. I work with clients now. I have one tech client that, our motto now, because we've kind of tweaked it, is I used to have to log into 19 different tools to run my F&B division. Now I can log into one and have all the tools that I need in one place and get a clear vision. So those are the kind of tools that are great, where you can become more efficient and make the guest life better. What I will flip on it too is using that technology. So when you have that free time, is how can you create more catered moments to those guests, right? How can you use AI to see, all right, here's all the guests that are coming today. Run a prompt that says, give me what their past stays were like, any requests that they had. I want to make sure I have it, and give you that quick bullet point list that would have taken you a couple hours to do. You can do now in a minute. And be able to, jump on those things. Because I really like the craft things now of like, I took the time to think about that magazine, or, hey, I know this is your favorite food, or, hey, your kids are coming and here's something for them. Those are things that will stand out now. And so when people say, oh, AI and ChatGPT and all these things, are not going to work in this industry, or we have to not lose a human touch, is using that to free up the time for the human touch. And so that's what I think the future will be if they do it right.
Using high tech to deliver high touch.
I love that.
Yeah.
There you go. I haven't heard that quote. That's a great quote. I'm stealing that.
Well, we just made it up right here together. So
did you? I like it. Sound like you had that one ready. High tech to be high touch.
Blend of high tech and high touch, I feel like has been spoken about. But you're right. I think our world is never going to lose the human factor, but technology can make us so much better, so much faster, so much, like you said.
Yeah, I use it daily, multiple times a day for all different things. And so if you're not on it, do you use it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was someone who was like, oh, ChatGPT, like, what do you need that for? And then I started using it, just like you said, just started playing around with it. And the amount of things that I feel like I have a brainstorming buddy with it is incredible.
Yeah, I offer so many complex things to AI, and it gives me so many ideas I had never thought of. And I just know that if you're competing against Katie and I, and you're not using it, you're going to lose.
Right.
That's how I say. If you're not going to use it, we're going to be super powered.
Right.
And you will not be.
Right. Well, digressing onto our last three questions, what was the best hospitality experience you've ever had?
So I've had a lot, and I had to think about this one. And this one goes back to actually 2004. And it was like my last family trip, as a unit with my mom, dad, and my two younger brothers, because we were all graduating college around that time. And so we had one last trip, and we went to Barcelona and France during the Christmas break, and Madrid. And so in Madrid, there was a little restaurant. We were walking around the streets, and it was, a random time. I think it was probably like 4:30, 5 o'clock. And it was a restaurant called El Rincón de Esteban, right? So my mom pokes her head in, Venezuelan, speaks Spanish in there, and says, look, we're looking for a place to eat. We know it's a little early. And the owner comes out and says, because I guess they had told us no, but the owner came out and said, look, if you can be done here in 1 hour and 30 minutes, you can come in and we'll take care of you. And so we came into this empty restaurant, beautiful. It's still there. I was just looking at the reviews to see if it was still in existence before I talked to you. And it was just an awesome meal. It was like, they kept bringing out food, and they became friendly with us and took a liking to us and kept bringing us out dishes, almost like a tasting menu that we didn't order. And I tried so many different foods that I hadn't tried at that time. And everyone was laughing around the table and had smiles on my family's faces and the servers. And they started singing there. And I was just like, man, this is a special moment looking back on it. So I'm going to go to that one, because they could have just said, no, we're closed. And instead we came in, they took care of us, and we left with a great story. And I think that's really what hospitality comes down to. Like, they took care of a family that was on a trip, didn't have to. And I still remember it now to this day, 20 years later.
20 years later, you're still thinking about it and talking about it, and the impression that it left on you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And on the flip side, what was the worst?
Yeah. So I've had many bad ones too. But I will say the worst, and I'm not going to say the name of the hotel, but it's a hotel in Miami Beach. Okay. And it's just disappointing, right? I want to own a hotel so badly, and I'm working on it. That's the goal this year. And we're going to make it happen. There's a hotel in Miami Beach that is like, is falling apart, but not falling apart. The building inside, like you have couches that are peeling. You have menus that are on rusted stands. You have lights that are flickering. You have water leaking through the walls. You have all this going on. And guests are still paying $300 a night to be there. And it is one of the lowest rated hotels in the city. And it just drives me crazy. Yeah. That is what people are paying for. And you're staying, you get people to stay there. And it's just disappointing, right? So I'm going to do that one because it's all in control of somebody. You can make small tweaks. You know, you could go to IKEA, right? I always tell people don't buy IKEA furniture, but you could go to IKEA and make this furniture better than what you have in your lobby and in your bedrooms of what you've got for not that much.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think people give the industry a bad name, and I get really upset about it because there's so many people who want that opportunity to do a great job, especially in your location. And I just don't get how you could be in that industry unless you're laundering money or doing something like that, right? So that's what I see as my worst. There's so many bad meals and different things, but that's really one that stands out in my mind because I want that. I wish I had that place.
Right.
I put it that way.
Someone who's really wasting that opportunity and then giving the industry a bad name, it gets under your skin.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is one. I have a vacation rental one, but I think I'll go with this one. If you want the vacation, I'll give you both.
Yeah, let's hear it.
All right. So of all things, it was in Asheville, North Carolina, where this thing is happening right now. And we went there for a summer vacation. It was a well-known brand. Okay. We booked a home. Can't get a hold of anybody as I'm trying to get up there. Everyone has automated messages, not getting the messages I need. Arrive at the house late at night in the dark up a mountain. Don't have the right codes. Finally get the codes as if it was like a favor to us, even though we spent a lot of money to go to this place. First day was fine. Not the cleanest place, but okay, we're in the mountains. There's stuff that happens. Then it starts raining. There was a tropical storm similar to this had come up, and we lost power the first night, which we didn't realize controlled all the pumps to the water. So we had no running water. We had no power. We had no internet. And I got 2 little kids at that time. They were very little. Call them for any help. They're like, sorry, you're on your own. We can't help you right now with power or anything. And I was like, well, do you know, can you call the company and find out for us? Like, no, but you can. Here's the number. And so I was like, oh, okay. So I call the number. Of course, they're working on it. At that moment, lightning strikes, lights something on fire in their backyard. Okay. So even though it's raining, something happens. We got a fire burning in the backyard, and we're in a remote area of the mountains. And so we call that guy again, and he's like, I don't know why I called him. He's like, call 911. So I call 911, right? And they say, we can't get to you. The roads are starting to flood. And so I'm looking at my wife, I said, we got no power here. There's a fire. It's raining. And now they're saying there's a flood warning on the mountain. And now we see that it's super serious.
Yeah.
So I said, all right, we're getting in the car. We're getting out of here. We left all of our food, all of our stuff. Yeah. We took our bags, but we left a lot of things there. Got in. There's trees on the ground. It's like a bad storm. And luckily we had a good SUV. I found a Hampton Inn that had 1 room left. And that was like the best Hampton Inn I've ever had. We got there. They took care of us.
Ever
I'm happy to be there. That night, we're like, look, we can't be at the place. We left. Can we get any kind of refund? They're like, no. We had a whole week ahead. They're like, no, you don't get any refund. I said, okay, fine. So we go back the next day. We can't get there because the road washed away. Right. So I can't even go back to enjoy it. So I had to take pictures of everything, the fire. I was taking pictures the whole time. And I sent it to the owner. He's like, you're not getting any money back. Luckily, I sent it to the channel that we booked on, which was VRBO for that time. They gave us some money back, but not all of it. But it just made me think, like, you helped me zero. You kept my money. I couldn't even get back to the vacation rental because there was no road to get there.
Right.
That is what gives people a bad name.
Gosh.
Like, hey, man. So that was my worst, probably. We'll stick with that one.
That's really bad. That's
Yeah.
That's
And I
horrible.
have pictures of the fire. So if you don't believe me, I'll send you guys the pictures of what was going on.
Oh my gosh. And just the like blatant disregard of like your problem, not mine. And also I'm keeping your
like
money.
zero
like,
help.
oh my gosh.
And so that's when I realized, all right, let me dive into this a little bit more. It's one of those things, right? It's not true hospitality, people.
No.
Like who's running it, who owns this place. It's not what it is. It's a money.
Right.
I'm taking your money.
Exactly. Well, final question for you. What does hospitality mean to you? And is there anyone or any brand that you think has truly mastered it?
Yes. So hospitality to me is really taking care of you as if you are their family, right? And it's hard to say that because the word family gets thrown a lot around. But I like to think that if somebody is staying with us at Tangy, or if I'm working in a hotel, I'm going to do my best to give you the same service that I would give my own family that is staying there. And there might be things that come up and don't happen, but I'm going to do my best to do that. And if I can figure out any moments to wow you, we're going to do that to the best of our ability. Right. And so this is things that are different at all price points, right? Because, Steve, it's $100 a night. How could we give the same service as someone charging $1,000? I think all the things that you can do to anticipate someone's needs and make sure that they're happy when they're with you, that's what hospitality is to me, right? Like treating someone like you would your own family to the best of your ability. And companies that do it well, it's really hard to do well. And it's very hard because it comes down to interactions with people. And so you could have a super expensive hotel, but if that person's rude to you at the front desk, all of a sudden it's not a great hospitality experience for you. And so, I mean, it might be cliche to say, but I've been to a couple of their properties and I've never had, everyone seems happy, I'll put it that way, is when I go to a Four Seasons property, which is very expensive to go to for most people and for me too, right? And so I'm spending money to go there. I really want it to be good. They've never disappointed me ever. And I was just there for an event that was happening, and you check in, everyone's got a smile. Can I get you water or a glass of champagne? I took the water because I had just finished going for a jog. But, on the pool deck, everyone is checking in on you at all times. The room, perfectly maintained, no dirt anywhere. And I was doing like the hotel check, touching everything. Nowhere. You go downstairs, everyone's smiling in the restaurant to greet you. I mean, it's hard when it's hard to hire and train that way. So I think that they have it. And one of their managers I was talking to, just because I was like interacting with them, has been with the hotel company for 20 years, all different around the country, and says that she feels pride and loves working there. And it just shows you, because there's not many places that you can say that about these days. Yeah. And so that's why you have so many career Four Seasons people. Definitely. So I put that. I wish I could say something else, but I just experienced it. So that was like, I think they're doing it top of the line. They're doing it well. And like you said, it's not easy, particularly at the scale that they have. So the kudos is deserved. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You see some of these rates, and I'm going to talk about can I talk about this for a second? We're going over with you, but that's okay. You pay all this money, and I realize like, all right, I'm in off season, and I'll say we paid $550 a night, good rate, right, for Four Seasons, but it comes with access to an Equinox gym that would have cost $100 with a day pass. All the amenities they pass around the pool every hour were fantastic. They're leaving treats for you in your room. They have all these high touch amenities throughout the property, like in the bathroom, all the little things that you wouldn't think about, like they provide to you for free. Right. The check-in experience. So the quality of the linens and the towels, all those things, all of a sudden you're like, wow, this actually might be a better deal than you thought. So when people see some of those big numbers, yes, there are some hotels that charge gigantic numbers that should not be. Right. But there are some that do, and you do get a real value for it. Yeah. Like you touched on the hotel that's charging $300-ish a night and is falling apart versus, 500 something, and you're getting everything that you wanted that you didn't even know you needed. Yeah. So I was lucky at that rate, because usually it's like the 800, 900. We caught it maybe at a good time in off season here. Yeah. That's what I look at, is what value you're really getting when you're staying at those places. Right. Well, Steve, this has been so educational and so much fun for me. Thank you for your time. Well, I was happy to be here. Hopefully I didn't rant along too long, and it was provide some value to everybody there. But I'm grateful that you invited me on, and I'm wishing you the best on this show. I know you're going to do awesome. Thank you, Steve. All right, everyone. It's time for today's Sweet Summary, where I break down the key insights and actionable takeaways from today's conversation. What a pleasure it was to chat with Steve today. I mean, he is a true entrepreneur.
He has that unique ability to see a white space in the market, figure out how to build it better than anyone else has before, assess what he likes and dislikes about what he built, sell it, and then pivot deeper into the parts that he really enjoyed. Something in particular that he said that feels like the hallmark of a true entrepreneur to me is, I get lots of ideas, but it's the ones that stick around for a few weeks that I have to explore. I would guess that one of the secrets to Steve's success is he tends to begin with something he'd want for himself. First, it was the motivational messages he was sharing on LinkedIn, which then led to the creation of the Hospitality Mentor. He mentioned that when he first struck out on his own, many people had promised to help that didn't actually make good on their word. But there were a number of people who did help Steve. And building the Hospitality Mentor as the resource bank for all of the information that he wished he had when he was starting out sounds like the perfect motivator to me. Something that really stuck with me was Steve's scorecard. He said that even if he was on a deserted island, he'd be able to see the health of his business in a snapshot. Not to mention, he's identified the most important metrics and tracks those month after month. That's something that I'm definitely implementing into my short-term rentals today. And finally, when we were discussing the vetting process for Tangy management, Steve said the benchmark was, would you want your parents to stay here? What a powerful yet qualitative metric. To me, that's about ensuring comfort, safety, and care at the highest levels. It's no wonder that Steve has been able to build such trust with his clients, because isn't a deep commitment to quality combined with a personal touch what hospitality is all about? And that concludes another episode of Sweet Success. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. We all know how important those 5-star reviews are. I also want to say a massive thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in. It means the absolute world to me. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have ideas for future guests, new topics to cover, or even just want to say hi, don't be shy. Message me through our website, sweetsuccesspodcast.com, or on social media at Sweet Success Podcast. That's sweet like hotel suite. Once again, I'm your host, Katie Cline, and I'm super excited to see you all next week.